Now, an article came up about 3 hours before the shooting of this video that Phil Kessel nixed the trade to the Minnesota North Stars, and he listed a couple of reasons, but in a nutshell, it was because he didn't feel they were contenders. And I pretty much will have to agree with that. I think anyone would right now. Minnesota is a team in flux. Now, Kessel's got a $6.8 million, not a cap hit because it's $8 million cap hit per season, but he's owed $6.8 million over the next 3 years. So I thought we just, for fun, we take a look at the teams who Phil Kessel might think are contenders. And if he thinks they're contenders, well, I think a lot of people would think they're contenders as well. So I'm looking at CapFriendly right here, and let's go through each team. Starting with the Ottawa Senators, who have just over $37.5 million in cap space. Yeah, that's a hard no. That's not happening. They're years away from contending. The Colorado Avalanche have just over $37 million in cap space. Now, they have some re-signings to do, especially with Rantanen, who's going to cost them, minimum $9 million. But that's a team that's got a lot of possibility. Not only do they went 2 rounds in this playoffs, but it looks like they finally got some solid goaltending, and they have got a lot of young kids in the minors who may be contending for a spot next season. Not to mention a couple of first-round draft picks now. If I was Kessel, I think I'd put that on my top 8 list of teams that I would go to. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, who've got just a little over than $35.5 million in cap space. Yeah, it's a hard no. Even if they draft Jack Hughes or Kako, I still don't see that team having enough pieces to, maybe they make the playoffs depending on how well one of those 2 first rounders do. And I know Blackwood had a pretty decent season this year. It's something to build off on. They could have a goalie of the future, but I still think they're at least 3 years, 2 years away. Let's say 2 from being a contender. The Philadelphia Flyers at just under $33.5 million. Possible. I know they've got some guys to re-sign there, but they've got a nice mix of vets and young guys. And now they got a whole new coaching staff, and they finally have a good goaltender. So, although I feel the Flyers kind of have to prove it to me first that they're not going to belly flop again this season, I think that there are good signs there, and this might be a fringe team that Kessel might accept a trade to. The Columbus Blue Jackets with just under $32.5 million. Now, of course, they're losing Panarin and Bobrovsky. They might not resign Duchesne. If they resign Duchesne, I could see them going after Kessel. But then there's the goaltending question, right? So if I'm Kessel, would I think they're a contender again? I mean, after all, Bobrovsky, up until the Bruins series anyways, was doing really well. Maybe up until the 3rd game against Boston. He was doing fantastic in the last half of the season. Now it's a bit of a question mark in net. So if I'm Kessel, I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to go out and get a good goaltender before I even put you on that list. So I'm gonna give it a no there, even though at one point I picked them to go to the finals. The Vancouver Canucks with just over $30.5 million in cap space. Yeah, that's not happening. They just missed the playoffs, I know, but they're at least a few years away. I think we all know that. The Buffalo Sabres with just under $29.5 million in cap space. The goaltending question, they were great until about halfway through the season. They got a new coach in Ralph Kruger. Yeah, he could turn things around. There's Middlestat, who didn't have the season quite that everyone was hoping for. There's just too many questions in Buffalo. I still think they're at least a couple years away. They might surprise some people next year, but I'm gonna go with a no for that one. The New York Islanders with just over $29 million in cap space. This is a possibility. I might say this is on his list. Because A, they've got a great coach in Barry Trotz who's won the cup, who's proven, and B, they were just missing some goal scoring. That's basically what their main problem was. And yeah, I know they got to resign Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, and Robin Lehner for that matter. And yeah, will Robin Lehner have another great year? I mean, he's got the pedigree. He's finally starting to prove it. If I'm Phil Kessel, I'm going to have a soft yes on this, on the New York Islanders, because I think that's a possibility. The Carolina Hurricanes, with just over $28.5 million in cap space. This is another team that just needs some more scoring, because they've got pretty much got the defense set there right now. Now, I'm not going to get into, will they accept Jack Johnson too, and the trades on guys that might go back and forth. I'm not going to get into any of that. We're just talking about teams that Phil Kessel really might consider contenders. Carolina Hurricanes, I think the biggest question mark is the goaltending. And can they do it again? Can Ron Brind'Amour get this team to do it again? Will Justin Williams resign? I mean, Curtis McElhinney is great, but he's 35 years old. He's just started to play really well with the Maple Leafs a couple years ago, and this is his third year now, which he's doing. Can he do it? Can he do it again? Peter Mrazek, yeah, he had a good last half of the season, including the playoffs, until he got injured, but I don't know. Again, it's got to be, let me see it again next season. And I think that's what Phil Kessel is saying. I'm going to say that's a soft no. The Winnipeg Jets, they've got just over $25 million in cap space. Yeah, I know they got a lot of guys they got to re-sign here, right? But if I'm Kessel, I'm thinking they're a contender. I definitely think they can go back to the show. I know there's Hayes who might be leaving, and who are they going to resign, who are they going to shuffle around. But they got the goaltending. The defense, a bit of a question mark. Trouba again. Tyler Mars might be leaving. But I'm going to say a soft yes for Winnipeg. Although I think they're a hard contender, there's a lot of question marks in the who's coming and who's going there. The San Jose Sharks, you could say the similar thing about. They have just over $24.5 million in cap space. If they sign Karlsson, they re-sign Karlsson, definitely. I don't think they're going to. I think Pavelski will probably resign, as will Thornton. And then they've got Timo Meier and LeBlanc, amongst others. Is Hurdle up for another contract? I'm not sure. This is possible. I keep on one. Wilson, their GM, never put anything past them. And I definitely, if I'm Kessel, I'm thinking this is a contender. At least for, a couple more years. I know Martin Jones is a bit of a question mark, and he came around a bit in the playoffs, right in the middle. He wasn't good at the beginning, he was great in the middle, and then he kind of fluttered out there in the last 3 or 4 games. But if I'm Kessel, I'm probably saying yes. The Florida Panthers, they've got just under $22 million in cap space. Now, everyone knows they're going hard after Panarin and Bobrovsky. Can they fit a Kessel too? Can they send bodies back the other way? Their defense needs to be shored up. I mean, I see this. Remember, this team had the second overall power play during the season, but the assistant coach who was in charge of that power play is now the assistant coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs and in charge of their power play. So, I mean, yeah, Florida you can always use more depth, but I think defense is a bit more of a priority. I'll give that a soft yes. A soft yes on them being contender. Yeah, I know they didn't make the playoffs. Everyone just sees them with that potential, but with Joel Quenneville there, I'm going to roll the dice, and I'll give it a soft yes. Minnesota Wild, they've got just over, yeah, that's enough said. I'm just going to stop myself right there. Chicago Blackhawks, they have got just over $20 million in cap space. Chicago had quite the turnaround about halfway through the season, and they still have some key players there. It's the goaltending, I guess, which is a huge question mark. I'll give it a soft yes. Chicago's now got 2 solid lines with Strowman, DeBrincat, and Kane and Taves, amongst others. I'll give it a soft yes. I still think there's too many question marks there, though. The New York Rangers, yeah, no, that's not happening. They're a rebuilding team. They've got just over $19 million in cap space. The St. Louis Blues have just over $18.5 million in cap room right now. Quite possibly. I see the St. Louis Blues as being a contender for at least a few years to come. I know there's some guys that need to resign. Patrick Maroon, I don't know if he's going to sign a nice friendly deal like that again. But I can totally see Phil Kessel saying yes to the St. Louis Blues. The Dallas Stars, with just under $16.5 million in cap space, absolutely. They prove they can really play team defense. They've got the goaltending. They just need more depth in scoring. This, I think, is huge plausibility. The Calgary Flames. This is a hard one. With just under $14.5 million in cap space. Yeah, I know they've got Brady Tkachuk to sign. Brady Tkachuk? The other Tkachuk brother. One of the Tkachuks. They have to sign. It's a question of cap space, etc. But for me, it's more goaltending. I don't know. Riddick is on and off. Smith, I don't think, is coming back. So who's going to fill that gap right now? Are they going to go after a UFA? And I'd probably, if I was Kessel, I'd probably have to see them with good goaltending first. Because I know they flamed out in the first round, no pun intended, but this is definitely a team with depth that is just missing a couple of pieces, and Kessel could be one of them. I'll give it a soft yes. The Detroit Red Wings, yeah, no. Just over $13.5 million cap space. They're not a contender. The Los Angeles Kings, yeah, I'm going to say a hard no on that one too, with just over $11.5 million cap space. This is a team with... I think that are years away from contending again. 3, maybe 4, 5. Maybe Doughty or Kopitar might be going somewhere at some point. I don't know. The Montreal Canadiens have just over $11.5 million cap space. A soft no. Montreal, I know they've got Price, and he showed some really good signs in the back half of last season. And yeah, they could use some more depth scoring. Are they a contender, though? I know they just missed the playoffs. And then Claude Julien's doing a really good job with him now. And yeah, Phil Kessel, there's a relationship there. I don't think so. I'm gonna go with a soft yes. This is one I could be wrong about, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. Edmonton Oilers, yeah, no. Making just over $10.5 million now. At the moment of this video, Dave Tippett sounds like he might be the next head coach, but there's just too many pieces that need to be filled around Connor McDavid and Draisaitl there on defense, on forwards, and goaltending everywhere. I mean, maybe he can get this team barely into the playoffs next year, meaning their new coach. I don't, unless some major moves are made. I have to say no. Washington Capitals. Yeah, they're in the same division. That's not going to happen, right? Capitals only have just under $11 million in cap space, or just over $10 million, excuse me. If there's a really good hockey deal here to be made for each team, crazier things have happened. Probably not. I'm going to say a soft no. But this is definitely a contender. The Anaheim Ducks, yeah, no. They're years away from contending. They have just over $9 million in cap space. Toronto Maple Leafs have too many caps problems, and he's not going back to Hot Dog City. The Arizona Coyotes have only just over $8.5 million in cap space. And yeah, they could use some scoring, and they almost made the playoffs, and Tocchet has been doing a really good job, and he's got a fantastic relationship with Kessel, but honestly, I think he's got them playing like a solid team defense all the way around. I'm going to say a soft yes, only because of the Tocchet relationship and the fact they almost made the playoffs, but I don't see them being contender. So I think if this was on Kessel's list, it would be near the bottom of it. Next up, Tampa Bay Lightning. They have just over $8.5 million in cap space. They've got to re-sign Braden Point, amongst others. It looks pretty impossible. They're definitely a contender, and you keep hearing rumors about, if Carlson was available, that they would make room for him somehow. They've managed to wiggle their way around the cap and make some, wave some magic before, but it would have to be a real hockey move. And again, it's the same. At least it's the same conference. I'm going to give this a soft yes because they definitely are a contender. But it would have to involve a lot of bodies moving back and forth. Probably Callahan would be at least one of them involved in that one. The Nashville Predators, with just over $7 million in cap space. If they weren't so close to the cap, I'd say a hard yes. I'm going to give them a soft yes for that reason. because maybe there's some trades to be made there. Because Nashville, that's all they're missing. I mean, you could argue their goaltending sometimes isn't perfect in the playoffs, but it wasn't bad this time around. The defense really is there. They really need some goal scoring. I'm gonna give that a medium yes. The Pittsburgh Penguins, yep. The Vegas Golden Knights have no projected cap space. It would have to be some kind of hockey deal for that to happen. I'm going to give that a soft yes, because they obviously are contenders, but it would probably have to involve Pacioretty, who's got a lot more term, for, I want to say, right around the same amount of money. Is it around $7 or $8 million? Maybe because Kessel can put up, more points on the board. Would Pittsburgh look at that? Getting Pacioretty back. Interesting. I know they're not getting rid of Stone, but if Pacioretty could be had, who knows? Thank you so much for watching. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on where you think Kessel might go, who he thinks a contender might be, how realistic of that group could literally take him on. And there you have it. Hit like if you like this video. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And hey, if you happen to have any Hockey Geek friends, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.